Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year. But the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in Boston, Massachusetts, and you're listening to the Abortion Diary podcast. These are the stories we share.
My name is Cassandra, and I'm 23 years old, and I had my first abortion when I was 18 years old. I found out that I was pregnant in my second go at rehab at 18, where I was there for cocaine and Xanax addiction. 2 weeks into the program, I realized I hadn't gotten my period, and my therapist encouraged me to take a pregnancy test. It was somewhat accidental, I guess. But on the other hand, I wasn't really doing anything to protect myself beforehand. Upon finding out I was pregnant, I remember being really, really, really mad, angry. Anger was like a pretty familiar emotion for me, so it wasn't new or anything. And once it had passed, it turned in desperation as to figure out what to do. I didn't know who the father was at that point or the other party involved. There were several people that it could have been, none of whom I was really close with or really cared about. And but in a desperate attempt to cure my loneliness, I told all three of them that it was theirs. And so, to my great pleasure, I had 3 different young men calling my rehab facility, asking me to please, either have an abortion or keep it, depending on who it was. They all had different opinions, which I enjoyed for whatever reason. And I at 18 I was totally out of control. I was well on my way to prison or to death. And so upon finding out I was pregnant, while I remember being mad, after that had subsided, there was somewhere inside of me I was excited and I was happy and I was pleased with myself, because despite the fact that I was a drunk and a drug addict and I couldn't do anything else right, my body seemed to work, and I had gotten pregnant, and that meant that I was healthy and that in some way I was normal. And so I remember feeling pleased with myself. Once, and I decided I was going to keep it. At 18, I was going to have a baby. I was in rehab. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a boyfriend. But this baby was going to be a new start for me. And once I got out of rehab and I realized that there was no one there, that my family didn't support me, that all of these boys I had told weren't really serious and weren't really people I wanted to be with or have a child with, I decided that I would have an abortion. And the next day I called the doctor. It was very impulsive in a way. I didn't really think either decision out very well. And shortly thereafter, I went to the clinic and I had an abortion. And I remember afterwards regretting it. It was so confusing. I just remember being so confused and not knowing what was wrong with me, because I wanted to be a woman and I wanted to be normal and healthy, but I knew somewhere, or at least I told myself, that I wasn't. And because I wasn't, I didn't deserve to have a baby, and I didn't deserve to be normal or healthy or have someone love me and love a baby I was going to have or anything like that. After having my abortion and getting out of rehab, I continued to use drugs and alcohol. And shortly thereafter, I discovered opiates. And my addiction then changed to that direction. I started intravenously using drugs as well, and began using heroin, which was pretty wild. And my life was slipping through my fingers. I had a boyfriend whom I thought I loved very much, and we'd lay around in bed and get high together. And I remember thinking that I wanted to keep him so badly. I loved him so much. I thought I loved him so much. And so I told him I was on birth. And so in my head, in my deluded head, I thought that if I had a baby with him, if I became pregnant, that we would stay together forever. And so I lied to him blatantly and told him that I was on birth control, and we had unprotected sex, and within a month I became pregnant again. And upon telling him, he was terrified, and he broke up with me, and I was destroyed. I was miserable, but I was going to keep it anyways, because to prove something or whatever. Again, I don't remember any worse pain in the world than when that happened. That was the most miserable thing that had ever happened to me. I was sick for days. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't tie my own shoes. Upon realizing then that this boy wasn't coming back, and that if I had this baby, it wasn't going to prove anything to anyone, I again had another abortion by myself, without the aid of my parents or anything like that. And then I got sober again, which was great. And I declared to myself that would never happen again, that I would never use a baby as a way to keep a man, and that I would respect my body, and that I would use protection. And I think it was like 4 or 5 months into my sobriety, I got another boyfriend whom, again, I didn't get along with very well, but thought that I was in love with, and that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. And he didn't treat me very well, and I didn't treat him very well either, but somehow I was able to overlook those things and see right through them, past them. And again, history repeated itself. Several months into our relationship, I would become so anxiety-ridden at the idea of him leaving me, of being rejected by him, that I was looking for any way to keep him. And that feeling of wanting to be healthy and wanting to be normal, because I was sober, and I wanted to really complete that. And to me, something about being pregnant represented that. And I would imagine my life with him, and what a great life we could have. And if I imagined him as a father, which was ridiculous, and myself as a mother, the mother of his child. And it was like a fantasy world. It was like a something I would play with in my head, that when no one else was around, it was something that I had, this fantasy. And I let that get the best of me. And I stopped taking my birth control pills secretly. I didn't tell anyone that. And I started lying to him about taking my birth control pills. And within about a month, I had become pregnant again. And again, I was sure that I was going to keep it. And while it was scary and uncomfortable, deep down, I was happy. I remember being happy and thinking, this is it. This time I'm doing it. I'm not making any more excuses. I'm keeping it. I don't care. And I don't care if it's going to be hard. I don't care what my family says. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to keep it, because that's the responsible, mature thing to do, because I got myself here. And again, that boyfriend whom I thought I had loved so much broke up with me. And completely, in fact, completely lost contact with me altogether. And he didn't ask me how my abortion went once I had it, because I did decide to. And he didn't ask me how anything went in general. And that hurt really bad. That was very upsetting for me. And again, I felt so hopeless, because I had found myself in the exact same situation. I had let myself get pregnant almost intentionally. And in order to fulfill some fantasy I had of being healthy and happy and normal. And again, the person whom I had wanted to share this with had rejected me. And that was realizing that and having to accept that took quite a bit of time and effort and work. It was not something I accepted overnight by any means. That fantasy wasn't real, and it wasn't something that I could find in someone else. And that was shitty. After that abortion, I began using again, and my using, like they say, became gradually worse. I was doing really bad things to my body. I felt awful about my body. I can literally remember the thoughts I had about myself and my body and who I was, and I felt terrible. And late at night when I was by myself, it was as if I was praying, I don't know, talking to the universe, apologizing for having killed what was mine. I felt really terrible about it. I knew that I had done something wrong, that I had hurt myself and hurt what could have been, or something along those lines. But I knew, or I told myself at least, that my body was not good, that nothing about myself was good. And I would write about it. I still have the journals that I used to write in about it, over and over and over again, the same things repeated, telling these thoughts, you're awful, worthless, you're a slut, you don't deserve to be happy or have good things happen to you. And that was my reality for several years, I guess. And even still, after all of that, some part of me still had a fantasy about being pregnant and having a baby and having a man love me enough to want to have a child and a family with me. To me, that seemed like the ultimate kind of love. And so I continued to seek for that kind of love anywhere and everywhere that I could. I haven't had another abortion since then, or become pregnant again. But that doesn't by any means mean that I haven't struggled with this idea of trying to sort my fantasies out from reality. It's something I struggle with every day. I'm sober now. I have almost 8 months clean, which is a miracle. And while I don't still tell myself that I'm ugly and that I hate myself. I guess that I don't feel that way about myself today. I still struggle with guilt and shame about my abortions and the way that I used to treat my body at one point. I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for quite a while. And it's the biggest, that's the topic that continues to be retouched with my therapist or counselor and I, is this idea of love, of I believe that my abortions and my desire to become pregnant are somehow linked to my desire for love and my need to seek that out anywhere and everywhere I go. My therapist tells me that I'm a love addict, which I'm still trying to accept. I hope that one day I can have a baby. I still do. I never have been one of those women who didn't want children. I remember being a little girl and wanting to have babies, and wanting to get married and all of that. I don't really know why, honestly, because I'm not necessarily a good girlfriend or great with kids, but something about it sounds real nice. And I hope that one day I can do that and I can be responsible about it and good to myself in the process. I have spent time on the internet Googling. It's interesting that this is a podcast because I've actually researched if there's some complex that certain women have about becoming pregnant and then having repeated abortions. Because I've always thought that I was very, a lot of people have abortions, but do they have 3, and do they have one after the next over and over again? And is it always the same situation? And do they always do it to themselves? And, do people do that? I thought that I was the only one. So I've researched it a bit. I haven't really found anything, honestly. If there's some psychological, I don't know, complex, I guess, that would, as to why I would have had so many. Maybe it's not that many. I don't really know. I'm doing this podcast though because I hope that if there is anyone else who feels that way, because to me it seems so strange and weird and embarrassing, and I still feel that way, honestly. But I hope that if there's anyone else and I've never met anyone else, any other women who have had the same experience as me. But if there is, I know that for me it would have been real nice to have heard someone else say the things that I'm saying when I felt the way that I did, after and during my experience. But that is mostly my story. And every day is something I still struggle with. I don't know if struggle is the right word, because my life is really beautiful now. But I guess wrestle might be better. It's something I still ponder and turn over in my head and talk about when I can and try to learn more about, in some hope that one day I won't feel guilty about it and I won't feel sad, I guess. And that one day I can have this fantasy life that I have in my head. Maybe that can happen one day, in a way that doesn't make me feel bad about myself. The first one, my mother in particular, I remember telling me if you have this baby, I will not speak to you. And that in itself was sort of enough to say, okay, fine. And I do remember feeling I was very angsty, granted, but I do remember feeling really pissed at my mom, and I felt pressured, and even though all of her intentions were good. Then the second one, while my parents obviously, I didn't tell them for several weeks, and then I decided to, and while they were not thrilled by any means, they sort of their attitude basically was like, do whatever you want. We don't have control over you. And that second time was a little bit more, besides the fact that this like man I had loved with. And I was also very resentful towards these men because I felt mad at them for not wanting to support me and take care of me during this, if that makes sense. And so the second time was a little bit more of my decision. Yes, I in my head, I think this is probably how I looked at it, was like, well, I could do this, but it's just going to be too uncomfortable, and this man will hate me forever. Because I was still very concerned about whether or not he, about what he thought of me. That was very important to me at the time. And then the third time was solely my decision. And my family, in fact, supported me this time. I don't know if, I mean, it's difficult, when I think of my father, about him having a daughter who is, no parent wants to see their child have to go through multiple surgeries like that. And at that point, I think my parents found it to be immoral, in fact, for me to have an abortion. I remember my dad's telling me, I feel like you're using abortion as birth control, using that phrase. And that was immoral, and that was bad, and that if I were to keep this baby, he would support me. My mother not being happy at all, but kind of on the same boat, but too proud to actually say that, I think. And that was completely my decision, that third one. I think that I had grown up a little bit. I was also sober at the time. And the difference between when I'm sober and when I'm high is night and day. And in a way, as kind of upsetting as it was, in a sense, it was empowering. And I think that because I was taking control of my life and I was making my own decisions, and and it was after that third one that I was then able to talk about it a bit, and that I was then when I was able to sort of communicate to people how I felt, which was so over my head at the time as to how to do that. And that was when I really started kind of looking at why it happened, and what was going on, and why this kept occurring. And yeah, it was very, and then once I began using again, my outlook was totally different, and I was, when I'm using drugs, it's almost not even relevant because I'm so distorted in the way that I think. But yeah, I now, on a good day, can talk about what happened. I'm not ashamed of it. At least that's what I'm trying to tell myself, I'm not ashamed. But I think in some way I still am a little bit. But I don't know. So yeah.
And how were your experiences at the clinic? How did you feel?
Oh, they were wild, honestly. the first one, they weren't that wild. They were pretty wild though. I mean, they were just belligerent. I was belligerent and angry, and I just was a mess. The first one, when I was 18, I remember like getting in a physical fight with my mother, like on the way home, something like that. The second one, I was alone. And that was, gave me no better excuse. There was no better excuse in the world to get completely loaded than to go to the abortion clinic alone and have an abortion. I just remember that day. I mean, I couldn't see straight. And then the third one I brought to, because after that the third one, and this actually happened after all of them, but the third one I remember particularly, I was, again, looking afterwards, feeling so lonely and like deprived of love and affection, and had just felt as if I had lost something. I sought out love and attention from anyone. And the third one I brought along afterwards, a friend of mine who came to pick me up, and I asked him to come if all I wanted was for him to come inside and to rub my back while I was waiting afterwards in the bed or whatever, and in the room, and he didn't show up. And I was furious. And so I stormed out of the abortion clinic, and there were like some protesters outside who I like cursed at and like pushed and like became physical with almost. And ran down the street. I was enraged. And then, of course, got in the car, and then I think proceeded to sleep with him that day or the day afterwards, which was totally unsafe of me to do. So those were my experiences doing that. They were always very cloudy, and I remember just being that when you have so many emotions at one time, you're so for me, I was angry and sad and lonely and lacking in so many departments, and feeling all of that all at one time really does something to the brain, I think, because I was never very rational about, never very rational at all, or well behaved. But so yeah, those are my experiences at the clinic itself. Luckily, it being Oklahoma, I remember it's a little expensive, but treated very well always. And I think, and despite the fact that like I said, I was always very self-destructive afterwards. I never had any complications or anything like that. They all luckily, went smoothly as far as I know. And I think for the most part, and I'm generally, okay physically and everything. And the nurses and Larry Burns, they were all real great to me despite my difficulties.
This is Melissa, and thanks again for listening. You can continue to listen to our stories online through our website by subscribing on iTunes or SoundCloud or your favorite podcast app. And if you rate and review our podcast on iTunes, it helps new listeners find us by boosting our iTunes ranking. And remember, the Abortion Diary needs your support. Help the Abortion Diary continue its work and share our stories by donating, and consider supporting us with a monthly gift. I'll be back next week with a new story. New stories are posted every Tuesday. Until then, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Listen for us next week.